What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Four Tires and Fuel. I am your co-host, Steven Cherrick. I am the rear tire changer on the 38 truck for Lane Riggs and Front Row Motorsports.
And I'm back after a week being gone. Sorry about that. But I'm John McGee, co-host of Four Tires and Fuel with Steven here, front tire changer on the 41 Nice Motorsports truck driven by Bailey Curry, the 35 Xfinity car for Joey Gates Motorsports, and at Daytona and this upcoming week, the 44 Cup Series car for New York Racing, driven by JJ Yaley.
Yeah, awesome. So, Johnny, you were gone last week. I ran solo for the first time. It was
Yeah.
hopefully everybody enjoyed that one. And but yeah, so tell us about what happened with you at Daytona. We're going to touch on that a little bit because you did the cup race as well. So I kind of want to hear what you saw difference wise between, Xfinity and Cup and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the Xfinity race started a little bit chaotic. I was originally on the 35 car driven by Akinori Ogata, and he was caught up in a lap one crash, and it completely destroyed the right front. The right front clamp was bent in all the way, huge gap, and just the lower control arm and the toe link and everything was either bent or completely broken. So that was our race done on lap one. But the 53 was kind of, they were going to try and run the whole race, but they didn't really have a full pit crew there.
Yeah, you guys are
So,
they were pitted right next to us, actually.
yeah. So the competition director for Joe Gaze asked if, several of the guys from our crew would go over there and pit that car for the rest of the race. So we ended up pitting the 53 and actually I had a 20th place finish. So for us, that was a good finish. And then, yeah, the next day, actually, Joey had drove the 53 Xfinity car on Saturday night, and then on Friday night, and then on Saturday night, he was driving for his first start in the next gen Cup car, the 43 car for New York Racing, and yeah, so that was my first Cup Series race this year. Me and Steven did several Cup Series races last year for the 84 car driven by Jimmy Johnson and Legacy Motor Club. But this was my first Cup race of 2024. And yeah, it was a super speedway. So tires and fast pit stops didn't matter a whole lot, especially we were riding in the back all race too, trying to just save our stuff and be there at the end. So, but we obviously still want to go out and put on a performance and, give as good a pit stops as you can. So, yeah, how it works a lot on the super speedway cars is the front end of the car will be really tucked up under the fender there for some aero advantages. And so it was that way, but actually the right front in comparison to the 84 car that we pitted at Daytona last year came out really fast, actually. So it was not too much of a problem to pit. The only problem was the left front was the droop was a little long. So most of the time our jackman had to do a pump and a bump, but that was just part of having the car, part of the super speedway setup and for speed and aero. So we're running again this week at Atlanta, and Atlanta now after the repave is a very similar style of track with super speedway racing and drafting and pack racing. So I suspect we'll have a pretty similar setup and a pretty similar pit strategy.
You're probably using the same exact car because you guys didn't even tear it up in the cup race. Where'd you guys finish in that cup race?
I know for a fact we're using the same car because we have one chassis. So we are using it. We finished 20th, which tied the team's best finish. I think Greg Biffle had a 20th place finish at Atlanta in 2022. But yeah, so that tied the team's best overall finish. We were really happy about that. The car came back with without a scratch on it, finished on the lead lap, and obviously got a 20th place finish. So pit stops were good. All things considered, a little bit of the slower setup with the super speedway style, sometimes waiting on fuel, stuff like that. So, I think we got the job done. So yeah, we're excited for Atlanta and excited for some more races coming up. But definitely this week, we'll talk about it a little bit more later in the podcast, as we always do when we preview the next week's track. But I suspect a very similar setup and a very similar pit strategy to Daytona. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you got that opportunity. Did you have Cam Jack in that
I did,
car?
yeah. Cameron Kowalski was our jack man, and so it was a mixture of guys. Some our gas man Zach Brown. That was his first ever Cup race. Actually, our front changer, our rear changer, and our fueler were both their first Cup races. So yeah, they did really well and gained some experience, and yeah, hopefully going to take that moving forward and
Yeah, that's
um,
awesome.
see what we can do. So
Yeah, so how did it like fare difference wise on like the Xfinity day versus Cup day?
yeah, so generally pit strategy at a super speedway depend between the Xfinity and the Cup cars are going to be about the same. Um, it's either if you have to come down during a green flag stop, you're gonna basically almost always just do fuel only, unless it's like 8 seconds worth of fuel and you can do right sides or something like that. But pit strategy between the two is very similar, I would say, but with the Cup race being longer. But we actually didn't have to do any green flag stops because of the way the cautions timed out.
Yeah.
But the differences in pitting. So for five lug, and we'll get some video here next week after I pull up the Atlanta and Daytona video. But five lug, you're holding the gun sideways with the trigger in your right hand, and your left hand is on the stock of the gun. And it's all really about technique and accuracy. Whereas on single lug, you're actually switching your grip. So you're holding the trigger of the gun in your left hand and the stock of the gun in your right hand. And as soon as you engage, you're wanting to grab the rim at the same time as you're grabbing the trigger on the gun on the left with your left hand to speed things up. So that's a big change there for sure. Another big change is kind of in the choreography of the pit stop. So the way we do it for Xfinity is if it's a straight up stop, I'm going to pull the right front tire, but I'm going to leave it for my carrier to get. If there is an adjustment, I do roll my tire back to the pit wall. But unless there's a left rear adjustment, I'm going to go first in five lug to the left side, left front, and the jackman is going to come around me. But in the Cup Series and on any pit stop on the right side, every single time, doesn't matter what, there's an adjustment or not, I'm pulling the tire, and I'm throwing it back to the wall, and then tightening up the lug, and then I'm kind of curving out and letting the jackman through every time. So there's definitely some differences in the choreography of the pit stop. And that's definitely a change, going from, that's what we did a lot last year, going from five lug to single lug. And this week it was five lug to single lug back to five lug. um, but yeah, I think people always ask me, they're like, which one do you like more? I like them both. I think the same, five lug is all about the changer and accuracy and speed, and single lug is the whole stop is about speed. And mistakes are because the time is a lot shorter. Mistakes are you have a lot less leeway for mistakes, and if you do make a mistake, there's not a lot of ways to make up for it. So it's kind of perfection and just being on the absolute limit. And speed for single lug is compared to technique and accuracy for five lug are kind of they're different stops, but both. I know you feel the same way. We like doing both of them.
Yeah, I mean I love doing both, but and Blake, my front changer on the truck stuff, he always asks me, he's like, I've never done single lug. I've never even held a single lug gun. And I'm like, dude, it weighs like twice as much of it as an Xfinity gun and like probably 3 times as much as the clutch guns that we use in truck. Like it's super heavy, but it's not about the hand speed anymore. It's all about just go in, hit that lug nut, and as long as you engage that lug nut, the stop should be pretty good.
Yeah,
So
there are a few other differences that I can, forgot about. Like for a Paoli pit gun with 5 lug gun, Paoli also is the manufacturer for the single lug gun. But for a Paoli 5 lug gun, which I use for truck and Xfinity, I'm running that at like 200 psi, right around there. But for the Cup gun, I'm running that at like 385. So definitely a lot more psi, definitely a lot more torque on those guns. And another point that Steven brought up is on 5 lug, you're kind of winding up the gun. You're pulling the trigger a second or so before you get to the lug nut, and you're already having that socket spinning. So that first lug nut you can just pop right off. But for single lug, you're not able to engage or pull the trigger until you're fully engaged with the lug nut. So those are the big differences that in technique between the 5 and the single lug.
yeah, and so how did it feel like how comfortable did you feel getting back into the swing of like a single lug pit stop versus a 5 lug pit stop?
Yeah, I honestly hadn't done single lug practice in several months,
Like
and I went over and was able to do some practices several weeks before. And honestly, I was a little worried about how I would do, but I felt pretty good. Like I picked it up, um, better than I thought I would. I think the muscle memory of doing it a lot last year helped a lot. So yeah, and then going on race day, I knew that our objective was not to be the fastest pit crew on pit road, but to get the job done, um, as best as we could, but also not to make any mistakes, to get wheels tight, not to have any penalties, um, and get the car back on track. And so that was a little relieving knowing that okay, we're not going to have to run 8-second stops my first time back in a year. So knowing what the job was and the objective, and it's going to be the same this week in Atlanta is I think all in all it was a pretty smooth transition, or about as smooth as I could have imagined. So I was happy about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad, you didn't feel like you had any hiccups and you weren't like, "Oh man, am I going to drop a lug nut? Am I going to mess up or whatever?" Like, you didn't have any nerves like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely had nerves the first stop because I mean, you always do, but uh, we paint lines on our socket so we can see it stop. And for whatever reason, I don't know why. I get this way too in 5 legs. Sometimes I'm always like, after a stop, I'm like, did I get all of them tight? I'm always worried that I don't know why. It's second guess myself sometimes.
I have that issue too in 5 lug. I'm like, I did it at Milwaukee. Like we finished the second stop, and I was like, I had to go back and hit the first lug nut again because it didn't suck the wheel up all the way the first time. And I was like, did I get that wheel all the way tight? And like I went back and looked at the film, and I was like, all right, it's tight. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of gets magnified in single lug, obviously, because there's no safety net. Like in 5 lug, if you get 4 tight, or even if you get 3 tight, like depending at the track, depending on what corner it's on the car, it will be okay. But in single lug, obviously if something happens, you don't get it up tight, then that's a big deal. So there was a little bit of that in my head, even though I saw the socket stop. I went back. I knew I had it tight. I stayed on a little longer than I needed to. But that was really the big thing. I was like, man, I haven't done this in a little bit. I was like, I need to make sure I there was some second guessing, but it's at Daytona. Once you get up on track and run a lap or two, it's like, okay, it's good. So
Yeah, that's awesome. But just kind of for reference, my wife was thankful enough to bring me this lug nut. So I have a 5 lug
mhm.
nut, and there's 5 of these on the car, and this is how big it is. This is a single lug nut.
Yeah.
Like, this is an actual 1-to-1 comparison. Like, I can fit like 20 of these around this lug nut. So like,
Yeah.
you have to be super accurate to hit these. You just got to engage to hit this. Like,
Right.
this is what it looks like. The pins go into these little holes, and it's got this ring around it, and it grabs onto it with a magnet, and it pulls it out and stays locked into the gun. So that way you don't drop it, you don't have to change it out. You don't pre-glue these onto the new one, like anything like that. It's just, this is what we got. And you use
Yeah.
the same one the whole race. So hopefully you don't drop it on the ground, because I heard they're pretty expensive.
One thing to mention about that, so our rear changer was a development guy at Penske, and we were pitting right next to the 2 car, and so Penske guys were kind of helping him out. They had a lug nut attached to like a pulley kind of thing, and I'd never seen this before, but they would put that lug nut in the gun and they would pull it up, and it would measure how much foot-pounds of force was required to pull it out, which was really cool. So
Is
they
that
were,
to make sure the magnets were working?
yeah. So
That's wild.
and they had some other things too. They had these little like shims that they would put in the gun, and it would, like, I guess, better seal the like the O-ring, and it would like increase the pull force on it. So that was,
What?
yeah,
That's wild.
I know. I'd never seen that before. So yeah, that was, they said they wanted like a good magnet or a good seal was like 30 foot-pounds of force, like per, I think it's 30 foot-pounds. And
Which is not a lot, by the way. Like, I think you can, like, the average person can like pull. I think, like, when you twist off like a soda bottle cap for the first time, it's like probably close to 35 foot-pounds.
so we had ours was like pulling at like 15 to 20. So I didn't use one, but our rear changer put a shim in, and it put it to like 30. So it worked pretty well.
That's pretty awesome. I didn't know about that. That's you learn something new every day. Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I said, I didn't know about that either. So yeah, there you go.
So how did your race go at Milwaukee? Because I gave my explanation, everything, and
Yeah.
we're kind of touching on Daytona, so we might as well touch on Milwaukee.
Yeah, first of all, Stephen, congratulations on your win.
Oh,
That
thank you.
was
I
awesome.
appreciate it.
We talked earlier in the podcast after I won at Darlington. I said, I know you have one coming. So that's awesome. You got
I
one.
didn't think it was gonna happen there. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, you must love Milwaukee. So I'm sure Steven mentioned it in last week's podcast, but he won last year at Milwaukee with Grant Infinger. So he's 2 for 2 at Milwaukee.
Guess what? They're not racing there anymore.
Yeah.
I will forever be 100% at Milwaukee.
That's right. So yeah. Anyways, it was not the best luck for us, unfortunately. We had a flat tire, a left front get cut down like 8 laps into the race, and had to do damage control after that. And the left side of the truck was really, really low. So every time we did a pit stop on the left side, we had to pull up on the left side to get the jack under. So
Even after like a full fuel run,
yeah,
or like a full stage.
Yep. So
That sucks.
yeah, it was a little low, unfortunately, and but we battled all day. We went 3 laps down because we had a flat, and we had damage. Like, it was not only fixing the flat, but it was lifting up and then beating out the damage on the left front fender. So we lost 3 laps. We gained a few of them back, but we were behind the 8 ball for the rest of the race after that. So yeah, that was it. Another crazy thing too is I'll mention. So I got a call. We landed. We so my schedule this weekend was a little crazy. We did the Xfinity race Friday in Daytona, stayed overnight, pitted the Cup race on Saturday, flew back on a Stewart Haas plane to Concord Airport, and I got in at like 1:30 in the morning. And then by the time I got home, maybe it was later than that. I think I got to bed at like 2:30 or something. And then I had to wake up at 8 for to drive up to Statesville to fly on a chartered plane to Milwaukee. We landed. We left at 10:30 or 11, and we got there at 11:30 Central Time. And once we land, I get a text. Hey, do you want to pit the? I need you to pit the ARCA race. Starts at noon. It landed at 11:30, and the track was like 25 minutes from the track. The airport was 5 minutes from the track. So like as soon as if you can get there by the halfway point. So we got there with like 15 laps after the green flag and did a pit stop and then immediately turned around and did the truck race. And
what car were you on for the ARCA
I was
race?
on the 2-car, Andres Perez de Lara, Rev Racing. And we were running, I think we finished in 5th, but we were running like top 3 for the majority of the race. So
yeah, he's a good driver. I pit for him earlier this year.
Yep. So he's winning the points, I believe, or at least up into Milwaukee he was. So
that's awesome.
Leading the points in the ARCA. So yeah, no, me and Steven have both pitted for Rev Racing in the ARCA series this year, and yeah, it's a good program, and yeah,
love those guys.
Yeah.
Those guys that do the Rev ARCA stuff, don't they do that 44 New York racing car?
Yeah, they do. They do. So
yeah, that's what I thought.
A lot of the guys who were doing that were road crewing and working on mechanic crew for the 44 Cup car. So a lot of familiar faces. And my first ever crew chief in Xfinity, Mike Tisga, was the car chief on the 44 car. So yeah, kind of.
Did he remember you?
Yeah. So Mike was actually at News Motorsports this year, and then he has since moved on to Joey Gay. So I've seen him all year, and yeah, we have a lot of. Mike is a great guy, so it was cool to have him on the 44 Cup car as well. So
that's awesome. That's see, it's always cool whenever like you think of people higher up, like car chiefs, crew chiefs, spotters, even like competition directors. We'll get to that a little bit later. Those guys, they remember you and they're like, oh yeah, you're so and so. It's like, oh dude, that's cool. I'm glad you remember me. Like it's such a big sport, but it's such a small sport all at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I know. I can't tell you how many people me and Steven know on different teams that will come up and talk to him, or they'll talk to us. And it's kind of like you work with somebody once or whatever, and then you know him, and then you see him, and you say hi, and it goes from there. And multiply that over all the teams or different crews or different teams you work for, and you end up knowing a lot of people in the garage. So
dude, when I was at the race at Darlington this past weekend, I was sitting up in the stands with my son and I'm looking down pit road and I'm like, I think I know at least one person on every pit crew.
yeah no, it's like that for sure. So it's like, oh, this car won. It's like, oh, I know X, Y, and Z, on that car. I'm happy for him and stuff like that. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Steven, we'll kind of hit on Darlington a little bit. I was away doing a Lamborghini Super Trofeo race at Coda this weekend. And Steven, you were in the stands watching the Darlington Xfinity race. So if you want to briefly kind of touch on that.
It was pretty straightforward race. I mean, it went by super quick. I think it was only like it started at 3:30 and at like 6:30 we were walking to the car because it was over. Like it was super short, only like 2 hours long.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was it started off really weird because Parker Retzlaff had a like some kind of mechanical problem where his car shut off on the initial start. And so he coasted around as far as he could and stopped in the middle of pit lane because he couldn't go any further. So the caution came out like on lap 1. And then like the 98 hit the wall, and the 9 hit the wall, and the 51 hit the wall. And like there were 2 other cars that had blown tires and stuff like that. Like all that stuff happened in like the first 10 laps. And then the race went green the rest of the way on besides the stages. So it was like until like I think 3 to go, the 16 blew a tire and hit the fence and the caution came out and it was green, white, checkered. But yeah, Christopher Bell dominated that race, deserved to win that race. But Sheldon Creed had the better long run car and he was going to win that race. But you know, it was pretty straightforward. As far as that goes, as far as the Xfinity race goes. But yeah, the Cup race was the Cup race was very nerve wracking for me because since I work over at RFK, I was really pulling for Chris Buescher, and you know, they didn't have the car. The car was way too tight, is what I heard, and they couldn't get it to turn. They didn't have a long run car. They didn't have a short run car, and so they were kind of just playing the "we just need to be good enough" race, and they were not good enough because Chase Briscoe won. So
yeah,
it was an awesome. It was awesome to follow along, and I think the broadcast did a great job of covering all the storylines. And you know, with Martin Truex Jr. wrecking on lap 2, like nobody expected that. So you know, there was that, and you know, Briscoe getting his first win of the season, locking him into the playoffs. You know, the whole race they covered Bubba Wallace and Chris Buescher and Ty Gibbs and Ross Chastain, those guys with their tight points battle. And then I didn't know, but I guess Tyler Reddick was sick all weekend and he was driving with like a stomach bug. And he's like, you know, he was getting like Tums and antacids and stuff like that fed to him in the car as he's driving. And like, you know, he's battling for the regular season points title with Kyle Larson. And like, it was cool to watch. It was I think they did a great job covering everything that was going on that weekend because there was a lot happening.
Yeah. Do you like Lee Diffie, the I believe that's his name, the commentator? Did a lot of IndyCar stuff and now has moved over to NASCAR the last couple of races.
See, I'm kind of weird because it's like I love the way British people talk when they announce stuff. So like listening to him commentate the race, I love it. I think he does a phenomenal job. I think his energy is great.
Yeah.
Like I can close my eyes and listen to him talk and know exactly what the heck he's talking about by the way he's describing everything.
Right.
And, you know, my wife told me when we first met, like I would listen to stuff on the radio and she's like, how do you know what's going on? And I'm like, I can visually see it in my head. And like those same vibes from him when I'm like listening to him. And he does a good job. He knows all of his stuff. You know, he does a lot of research. He watches a lot of film.
Yeah.
Like, he knows what's going on. And that's kind of what the sport needs is someone like that.
No, I agree. I really like what he's done. It's been a fresh perspective in the booth, and I really like it. I think he's done a great job. So I'm glad you feel the same way about that.
Yeah, I know it's very like I keep looking on like Reddit and Twitter or X or whatever, and like it's so like mixed reviews on like a lot of people like him, a lot of people don't, and so like I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah,
I don't think they need to change that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, do you want to hit on anything else at Darlington, or do you want to move on to Atlanta coming up here?
One of the things I noticed just real quick at Darlington was pit crew mistakes. I don't think the 23 guys made a single mistake. If they did, it was very minuscule. The 5 guys were very solid all race long. The 45 guys killed it all race long. The 17 guys struggled. And I heard that the 6 guys struggled really bad too. But it just goes to show that like when you put that immense pressure on those guys and like, you know it, I know it, we've felt it before. You know, when you have to go out there and perform, even though you've done this job 1,000 times, you've done 1,000,000 pit stops in your career with practice and at the racetrack, you still have that immense pressure and you feel it.
Yeah.
So it's like it just goes to show that like it truly is a team sport when it comes to NASCAR. And that's one of the things I wanted to highlight was like, it's crazy how your whole weekend can be like decided on the pit crew.
Definitely. 100%. I mean, it's definitely a team sport, from all the way back to the engineers and R&D, everything, to the way the mechanics and the crew chief set up the car. And then on race day, obviously, the pit crew is probably the biggest influence on the race other than the driver, of course. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, you can have everything go right, and then, a late race pit stop goes wrong or something happens. And, or especially in the single lug era, like, you have a loose wheel or something and a wheel comes off, like that's your whole race done, there. So yeah, obviously a lot of pressures on the pit crew, especially for those guys who are competing for a regular season championship or for the about 4 or 5, 6 cars that were trying to fight their way in to get those last couple of spots in the playoffs. It was a high pressure situation all race, and Darlington is one of those tracks where tires are incredibly important, and tire changers and pit stops really have a big impact on the race. So yeah, it was. It's. I didn't watch a ton of the race because I was at the airport flying back from Austin from Circuit of the Americas, but I did watch the last about 50 laps of it, and yeah, it was a lot of moving parts all throughout, not only on pit road but just the on track battle and everything like that. I thought was really cool to see.
Yeah. So what did anything interesting happen over with the Lamborghini race? I know
Yeah,
you were out there for like 5 days, weren't you?
yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I do season. So far, I've done 3 race weekends. Well, 4 race weekends total with IMSA, 3 with the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, and 1 with the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge. And this weekend was IMSA Lamborghini Super Trofeo race at Circuit of the Americas. And yeah, so normally our weekend for NASCAR is like, if we're only doing an Xfinity race, we'll fly the day of the race, get to the track about 3.5 hours before the race, set everything up, glue our tires, pit the race, get everything back to the hauler, and then we'll go right to the plane and get back. So sometimes it's not even a full day that we're at the track. But in IMSA, it's a lot different because you have a lot more stuff to unload. Like we had full tile floors and awnings and everything that we had to unload. And then so I got there on Wednesday. Thursday was our unload day and getting everything set up. Friday we had 2 practices. Saturday we had qualifying and a race, and then Sunday we had another race. So you're there over 4 days and 3 days of on track action. So it's a lot longer days, a lot longer time commitment, but I enjoy doing that. I enjoy those guys over there, and that type of racing with the sports car is definitely something different, a different world, kind of a different atmosphere than NASCAR. But a lot of actually our crew guys are former NASCAR guys or currently NASCAR guys who, like me, have a break. So we had the race engineer for the 43 Cup car at Legacy Motor Club was over there. One of the mechanics on the 84 Cup car was there. Former Xfinity crew chiefs, 2 of them were there, and a former competition director at Legacy Motor Club were all there. And the team owner, Brandon Godovic, had driven in the Xfinity series and the ARCA, well, at that time, K&N series. So it's kind of cool doing it all with NASCAR guys, but also racing sports cars and in a different format and stuff. So overall, it wasn't a great weekend for us. We just didn't really have the results that we wanted we ran 5 Lamborghinis in 2 races. Our best performance was a P2 in class, but I think we would have just liked a little bit more performance all the way throughout. But yeah, so it went good. Probably the biggest hiccup was Flight was delayed for about 5 hours in Austin because of some weather in Charlotte, so that was not
That
ideal.
sucks.
Yeah,
That's terrible.
at like 1:30 in the morning, Monday morning. So yeah.
Did they have at the pit road setup? Is it the same as like the IMSA stuff that we pit where they have like those like hubs basically of like all the stuff out there?
Yeah, so kind of talking about what Steven's talking about. So the pit road setup in NASCAR, you're just bringing a pit box out there, and you're only out there for a couple hours before the race, and right after the race, you tear it down. But these IMSA guys are there for like 3 or 4 days, so they have a whole setup on pit road. It has a massive pit box with all these computers and data points. In fact, a lot of teams will have two pit boxes, and they'll have these huge awnings and tents and everything set up. It's much more bigger. It's a much bigger setup, and but also you're cramming in a bunch of cars on pit roads. So you have multi-class racing, and so sometimes you might have 60 cars, where in NASCAR you're only having 40 cars max. So it's everybody's like really, really tight in. I mean, your area is big, but you don't. It's the pit boxes themselves are a lot smaller than NASCAR. So yeah, yeah, those are kind of the big differences between IMSA setup and NASCAR. But yeah, it's the same pit road that we use for the Cup Series or Truck and Xfinity when we pit at Coda. And so yes, I was used to it before. I'd been there before, so kind of knew what to expect when it came to that. So
Yeah. Cool. That's it's funny whenever like you go to these different like sports or series, I should say, and like it's like the concept is the same of just like put tires on the car
yeah,
as fast as you can, but like the behind the scenes stuff is like completely different.
yeah, and IMSA has different rules about who's allowed over the wall, what kind of equipment you can use, stuff like that. Like there's air jacks instead of a mechanical jack that lifts all four tires up at the same time. So you're right. It's the same idea, the same, it gets done, but it gets done a different way. So it's always kind of cool going into their world and seeing how they do things. And yeah, so seeing what you can learn from them, seeing if you can teach them anything from NASCAR. And so, yeah,
Yeah. So so that's where Johnny was at. That's why he couldn't spend some time with us.
yeah,
But but yeah, no, it's always fun to hear about like the different things that we do on the side.
yeah. So you want to move into a little Atlanta preview?
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Atlanta. They another super speedway race. Big drafting track. I've noticed that like in the Cup series, it's like they kind of stay more compact where it's like two lines of cars all the way throughout the field and sometimes they go three wide. But like the Xfinity series always like opens up where you have like a line of like 10 cars that are single file and then there's a huge gap and then there's like six cars single file and then like they kind of break up into their own little packs rather than like stay together in the Cup series, and I think that kind of makes for a little different strategy as far as who you're going to pit with, when you're going to pit, kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the Xfinity series largely has been single file. I know sometimes they do get strung out like 20 cars wide, but you're right. They do break up and are in their own little packs and stuff, but mainly single wide racing for the Xfinity series. Late in the race, it'll go too wide, or on, after restarts and stuff, it'll stay too wide for a little bit. But yeah, the Cup Series has been much more consistent in kind of the traditional super speedway drafting that we are used to, like two lines and pretty close. And sometimes they'll even open it up to a third line. So I think our strategy for the 44 car and even the Xfinity is going to be the same. Largely. Especially since the repave they did 3 years ago, it's not going to be an emphasis on tires, mainly on fuel. and getting it full, and so doing a full fuel run, and that's really really important at these super speedway tracks, or these super speedway, um, or these, I should say, drafting tracks. I think
Yeah, we
Atlanta,
can't call them super speedways anymore.
I guess Atlanta is technically an intermediate, but it's has racing like a super speedway. So the emphasis will not be on us as tire changers this week. I think in the Xfinity series, we'll do a lot of two tire stops, mainly right sides. It wouldn't surprise me if we do right sides and left sides, or right sides and four tires. And yeah, I think we did several of those stops in the Truck Series race earlier this year at Atlanta.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I'm expecting for pit strategy. Yeah, what do you think, Steven?
I think the biggest thing, especially for like, well, I'm not going to be there, unfortunately. But for you guys and like us on pit road is basically like the biggest thing is just don't make a mistake, because this pit road is one of the most unique pit roads because it starts on the backstretch. Like they enter pit road. The entrance to pit road is in turn 3, and they have to run. They can run no faster than 90 miles an hour through turn 3 and 4, and then when they actually get to the front stretch where like the pit boxes start, it drops to 45 or 55, I think it is. But if you have a tire penalty, if you're speeding, if you have to come back down pit road for whatever reason, it kills your whole race because you have to spend so much time on pit road. Like
Yeah,
I think this boils out to like the longest pit road out of any circuit just because of how far they have to start, because they have to start on the backstretch.
yeah, that's a really good point. A race probably is not going to be won by a pit stop in Atlanta, but it can definitely be lost for sure.
Oh yeah.
So, which is different because, like at Darlington, you could easily, in the right situation, you could win a race off of a pit stop. But in Atlanta, less so, because of track position is less important in a super speedway race, or a drafting style race. And especially if you make a mistake, don't get a lug tight, or have a loose wheel, or don't get it all the way full, for example, or have, like a pit road penalty. It, especially under green flag, it can kill your race. Under caution, it's not ideal, but under green flag conditions, you have to be really, really on your game to just not necessarily have a fast. You don't even have to have a fast pit stop. You just have to have a clean pit stop, penalty free
Yeah.
stop. So
Yeah, well, that was the thing too. Like the earlier this year when they ran Atlanta, I think it was the second race of the year. It had one of the craziest finishes because
yeah,
all of the Fords were on the same fuel strategy and they all ran out at the exact same time. They thought they were going to make it to the end, and then they all ran out. And like, the 39 Orion C ran out. The 00 Cole Custer ran out. The 15
yeah,
when Haley Deegan was driving it ran out. Like everybody at the exact same time was just like, "Hey, we're out of fuel," and they were like, "Oh, well, I guess we were closer than we thought." Like,
yeah. No, so one thing that Stephen, you bring up a good point at these super speedway tracks or drafting tracks at Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta now. Under green flag stops, if a fuel run has to happen during a fuel run runs through, and you have to split it up in the middle of the stage. You come down during green flags. A lot of times you're getting manufacturer orders that say, okay, hey, we're a Chevy. We're going to pit, all Chevys are going to pit on lap 75, for example. And they do that because all of the Chevys will then come out ideally at the same time, and they'll be able to draft with each other and really have a strong, they'll run well if they have a lot of cars drafting each other. Ford will do the same thing. Toyota will do the same thing. Lately, that Toyota's kind of had to have some weird strategy because there haven't been a ton of Toyotas. But I think in the Cup Series now, there's enough that that might be able to have their own pit strategy, or the very least, sometimes Toyotas will blend in with another manufacturer. So
Yeah, I know Chevy is it's heavily favored in Chevrolet's
they,
manufacturer side. Yeah, and so usually it's like the Fords and the Toyotas will pit together, or sometimes the Toyotas will split up, and some of them will pit with Chevy, and some of them will pit with Ford. But I know for sure, outside of in the Xfinity series, outside of the Gibbs cars, the 4 Gibbs cars, I don't think there's any other Toyota that's
yeah,
worth
Sam Hunt runs
helping.
pretty good, but that's really about it. But that's one car, so that's like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I I think if you get 5 or 6 cars in a line, you could probably be fast here just because it is such a small track.
right.
But if you ideally want that right around 10 cars is probably ideal
Yeah.
to have together in a pack.
So one thing we'll talk about here, if you're coming down a green flag stop in Atlanta, the most important thing is that you maintain the draft. If you lose the draft, if say you come down with Chevys, like we'll be pitting the 44 car, say we come down with Chevy, we're towards the back because that's probably going to be our strategy. If something happens and we lose the draft and there's 15 cars that take off and we're behind them, it is over with. That's the worst case scenario on pit road is you're going to lose a lap, or you're going to be detached from all your manufacturer help, and other manufacturers are not inclined to work with you necessarily. And so that can be game over for you. So, a lot of times if you're doing a green flag stop, it's really only going to be fuel only just because keeping that draft is so important. If there was to be a mess up with the tires or it was going to take an extra second, a lot of crew chiefs don't want to take that risk. So during green flag, a lot of it is on the fuelers and a lot of it is getting out. You don't have to be, you can even lose spots on pit road. You can come down first and leave middle or come down middle and leave towards the back. But you just can't lose the draft when it comes to that. So
Yeah, you don't ever want to be that last car off pit road because even if you have a good stop, if if you don't get hooked up fast enough, off pit road clean enough, you could have a good stop, but you still lose the draft just because all those other cars are going to get together faster and they're not waiting for you. They're getting together and they're going like that.
yeah,
You don't have time to be like, oh, Joey Gase in the 44 is hanging back. We need to go get him. Like, nah, screw him. We're going.
yeah, they're not going to mess up the strategy for 15 Chevys for one Chevy that's lagging behind. They're going to say,
Yep. He'll figure it out.
so, but I mean, you saw that at Daytona. We lost the draft in the first stage, and we went an entire lap down because we were running about 4 seconds slower a lap, just not being in the draft. We were running full throttle and both, wide open the whole time in both situations. But just the way the draft is, you're just carried along and you're bumping the person in front of you, and it's like a chain reaction. Everybody's going forward, but when you lose the draft and you're by yourself, it's detrimental, like huge. Yeah, it's just
You can't even put it in words.
yeah. Like I said, we lost 4 seconds a lap from being in the draft to not being. We were running 56-second laps in the draft, like 56:07, 56 flats, and then we were running like 59 something out of
Yeah,
draft.
that sounds about right. Yeah, and I know that's completely flip flop to the way it was in the Daytona 500 because I know AJ Allmendinger at the Daytona 500 lost the draft and he was running 2 seconds a lap faster than the pack because the pack was trying to save fuel and AJ Allmendinger was just hammered down. So he was actually running faster than the pack was. And yeah, it's stupid stuff like that just
Yeah. Yep.
irritates me.
Yep. So we'll see how Atlanta goes. It's like I said, largely going to be very similar to Daytona strategy. But one thing I want to talk about, Stephen, is Atlanta pit road. What comes to mind when you think about Atlanta's pit road, other than what we talked about earlier in the intro?
I mean, it's usually Atlanta's got they're not super big boxes, but they're not small either. They're kind of middle of the road sized, but they're a little more narrow than normal. And I mean, I usually never have an issue with those pit roads. I've noticed recently they can get kind of sandy with all the speedy dry that lays down with all the big wrecks. But other than that, I mean, I really don't think there's that much of a um anything to talk about on that.
Yeah, I've never had an issue with it. I know some guys complain that for tracks with the high pit road speed, like Daytona, Talladega, those type of tracks, Pocono, Michigan, Indy, like Atlanta is kind of that speed, a little bit, maybe a little bit under, like 5 miles an hour under, but the pit road is a little bit more narrow. The boxes are a little bit more narrow and definitely shorter than Daytona and Talladega. So I know have been guys who have gotten hit out on pit road in Atlanta because of that. So, but like I said, I've never really had an issue with it.
Yeah, but it was weird too because when we went to Milwaukee last week, or a couple weeks ago, they repaved the pit road for Milwaukee, and pit road speed limit was 55 miles an hour.
Yeah, so Milwaukee was crazy because last year it was like one of the worst pit roads. It was like big cracks everywhere. It was like it just was not very. There was like a lip between the actual pit road and then the running surface, like the pit stalls and then the running surface. But they repaved it. It looked really, really nice, actually.
Yeah, it looks great with 30,000 lines painted on the ground. I looked out there and I said, which line is ours? Because they had like the IMSA boxes and the Cup boxes, or the NASCAR boxes all marked as one. And I'm like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, it was confusing. It wasn't really marked out very well. The NASCAR boxes were orange and the IndyCar boxes were white. And so it was like, what? Where am I supposed to pit? But yeah. So one thing, if we're done with, do you have anything you want to finish up with on Atlanta?
No, I mean, I just expect, don't expect the fantastic finish that happened earlier this year. The 3 wide, crazy Daniel Suarez winning finish. It's not, I don't think it's going to be that way. I think that was perfect case scenario, perfect situation kind of thing. I think it's going to be, it's playoff time. So you've got guys that are points racing, you've got guys that are racing for wins, you've got guys that are trying to just, survive the race kind of thing. Everybody that's not in the playoffs is just make it to the, end of the race. So you're trying to just, you're going to have a whole bunch of different strategies playing out as far as like what people want to do. So it's not going to be the same as it was earlier this year where everybody's like, oh, we got to get a win, got to get a win. So don't expect that. That was very high bar that they set, but I expected to just be, a lot of give and take in the beginning. And then as the race winds down, you might see a couple of big wrecks, but I don't really think it's going to be anything like there might be a good finish, but I don't think it's going to be like that crazy finish that we had last year.
Yeah.
Or earlier this year.
I think there's going to be a lot more of teammates helping other teammates. And I think there's going to be a lot of the team game being played, a lot of the manufacturer game being played. And so I think you're going to see that more than you did earlier in the year at the Atlanta race in February, I think it was. So,
yeah.
Well, with that, one thing I did want to talk about was the 2025 NASCAR Truck, Xfinity, and Cup Series schedules got released.
Yes, they did.
So I wanted to briefly talk on that. There are some changes for sure. Stephen, I'll let you go ahead and what are your overall thoughts and impressions about the new schedules across the 3 series, and anything in particular you want to highlight?
I hate the fact that we're going to Bowman Gray for the Clash. I'm not a fan of that. Do I think it needs to be closer to home? Yes. It used to be in Daytona. That was fine. It went to LA. It was a hit the first time, and then it kind of
I did that race. I did that race last year.
Yeah,
this year actually. This year,
and
yeah,
it was a flash in the pan kind of thing.
Yeah,
but I don't think Bowman Gray's the answer. I don't think we need to go to Bowman Gray. So I'm not a fan of that. Going to Mexico, I'm kind of excited about that because when I heard about it the first time, I heard it was just Cup, and then I found out when the schedule released that it was Cup and Xfinity going. So I was like, oh, cool, we get to go to Mexico. I got to get a passport.
Yeah,
Um, so I like that. I absolutely love the truck schedule.
yeah.
They added Michigan, they added
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, they added the Roval, they
Yeah,
added Lime Rock, and they added Rockingham to the schedule.
yeah.
Like
That's awesome.
mind blown for all of
Awesome.
that.
Yeah, I'm really pumped with it. I think, and they added Watkins Glen. I think too. Did they not?
Yes, they put Watkins Glen back in the schedule.
So there's 3 road courses for the Truck Series, which I think is awesome. I think if you're billing the Truck Series as a developmental series, then I think you need to have more road courses. I'm
Well, they also upped it too. Like this year, it was 19 races, and next year's like 23.
I think
Or
it's
yeah, 23 or 25, something like that. Like
yeah,
they added like 6 more races to their schedule, which is awesome. I think the Truck Series needs more schedule or more scheduled races.
yeah. I agree, man. I'm super excited for Rockingham. I think that's going to be awesome. You have won a race at Rockingham. You're 1 for 1 for Rockingham too.
Yes, I am. I won in the late models with Brody Kostecki when I was uh road crewing for them back in like 2013.
So I'm super excited for that. It's a track that has a lot of history. It's like North Wilkesboro. It's been gone for a long time, and really, really excited to bring it back. I
They
think
repaved it too.
they did. They repaved it. I've just heard a lot of great things. I hope we have an amazing crowd there, and I hope that the racing is really well. It does really well there, and we can go back for many years, just like North Wilkesboro. I think has been a hit. It's been really well attended, and I think overall the racing, especially in the truck series, has been really, really good there. So I'm really excited for that. Rockingham's going to be awesome. The only thing that stinks about it is Cup only has 1 off week, and the Rockingham for the 5 lug cruise is that 1 week. So
Yeah, we don't get a break.
we don't get a break next year. But Mexico City is going to be awesome. So earlier I talked about doing the Clash at LA this year. I went out and worked for a NASCAR Mexico Series team and a driver, Coque de la Parra, who just won the NASCAR, finished the NASCAR Challenge Series, their version of the Xfinity Series regular season championship. He's been killing it this year. So as soon as news broke, I talked to him, and he's going to run the NASCAR Mexico Series race there on Friday, and then really wants to get in an Xfinity car and run there. And I think he would kill it there. So looking to actually get him hooked up with an Xfinity team. But definitely, I think I'm going to go down there the whole week, hang out with him. Going to do the Mexico Series race on Friday. Going to do the Xfinity race on Saturday there at the very least. So really, really excited about that. It's at the Formula One track. I think it'll be really awesome. And then, the other thing, Lime Rock, is an amazing addition for me to the schedule. You know, racing up in Connecticut, up in the Northeast, I think is an added bonus. That track is super fast. It's narrow. It's a lot of fun to drive. I know a lot of people have a lot of fun with it on the sim. I think it'll
I
be
know
awesome.
it also has multiple configurations, so I'm kind of curious to see what configuration they run.
Yeah, yeah,
Because they have a spot on the back half of the track where you can run the chicane,
hmm
or you can skip the chicane, and then it's just a sweeping right hander that leads to uphill, and it's like either way, it's going to be super difficult. And I'd like to see them run the chicanes, but I'd like to see them not. So it's like I'm just excited to be able to go there.
yeah.
I'm like a
The
kid in a candy store, man.
right. No, I agree. It's always cool to have these new tracks, and I think NASCAR did a great job with adding 3 new tracks across the series. One thing is, so that race at Lime Rock is a Saturday. So same day as a Cup race, but the day after an Xfinity race. So I'm really hoping that we'll be able to get up there and pit that race at Lime Rock. That would be awesome.
I think even if we can't, I'm gonna try to figure out how to get in there.
No, I am sure. I think definitely. I know a lot of truck teams, just like ARCA teams, will be looking for somebody to help. Change tires if there's an emergency or if there's a flat tire or something like that. So I think it's definitely a possibility to get up there and do that race too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the dude. The next year's schedule, like I said, for the truck series, it's gonna be so awesome. Like
Yeah,
me and my family are actually camping out for the Roval this year. And
nice.
then when I found out that we're camping in the infield, and when I found out that the truck series was added to the Roval, I was like, "Oh man, that is awesome!"
Yeah,
Now, not only do we get to camp for the Xfinity and the Cup race, but now we get to see the truck race too.
yeah,
Like,
that's
oh man, it's gonna be so
going
awesome.
to be really cool. Yeah, yeah. The truck series and the Xfinity series for me is like some of the best. I mean, yeah, I think it's great. I think we should look to add more tracks. I think, you know, I would like to see Kentucky back on the schedule. I've never been there, but I think with the way that the next gen cars race really well at intermediates, I think that would be a good addition. Um, but either so, I'm really happy with the schedule. Really happy to have the Cup Series go to Mexico City and the Xfinity Series too, and then obviously Rockingham and Lime Rock. I think are going to be really really cool. So
Oh, one of the things I heard for the Cup series. Well, actually, this is for all three series, but it really pertains to the Cup series. Um, So if you looked at the schedule for the Cup Series, they race it like at Homestead, like the seventh race of the year.
hmm
And I heard a couple of rumors that they're racing Homestead. They moved Homestead up to race it like super early in the schedule. So that way they can repave Homestead and then try to get Homestead to be the championship race
oh wow.
again back in 2026.
Wow, yeah, that'd be great. I know there's a lot of memories of epic battles for the championship at Homestead, and it's such an awesome track because it can run so many lines there, and it's like a very it's a driver's track running that high line and just hugging the wall the whole time around the track is. Now I like Phoenix. I think Phoenix is unique. It's a cool track, but I don't think if you're running that track as a finale, I don't think it should have two dates. That's just my opinion.
I think so too, but I liked Phoenix before they moved the start finish line. When they repaved it and moved the start finish line to that like just out of turn 4, like that's what I think ruined Phoenix for me because basically on the initial start you're not even taking the racetrack. You're all the way down on the apron as close to the pit wall as you can go when you
Yeah,
take the green.
yeah.
Like I think they should have left the grass there or put up the pit wall to extend out further. Like do something because I don't like the fact that like as soon as you take the green and you cross the start finish line, you're 5 wide.
Formula One fans are losing their mind when they see all the track limit violations.
It's a penalty.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I think there's definitely room in the schedule. Like, Phoenix have one race a year.
What do you think about
Vegas,
them taking the one Richmond date? Like
probably
Richmond only has one race next year for the Mexico race.
fine with me. Richmond
Yeah,
has not been very well attended. The racing is mediocre. Of all the short tracks, I would say it's probably the worst racing.
unless you're Austin Dillon.
Yeah, and I just overall, if I had to rate my least favorite NASCAR track, it would be Richmond. I don't know why. It's just mid. It's just like everything about it is like okay. There's nothing about it that is like wow, we're going to Richmond. So
See, it used to be such a great track, and like this car just does not suit that track at all, and I think that's the biggest problem.
yeah, sorry, Richmond.
Hate it for you, but I honestly think it's going to go this way. It's going to trend to where every place only has one date, except for like your big money races like Daytona and Talladega,
Yeah,
like a
I
couple races like that.
I think you should have like 5 crown jewels, like Daytona, Talladega, Bristol, Martinsville, and
Yeah.
either Darlington or Charlotte. Even I don't think you like if you're racing at. I wouldn't mind Charlotte losing a date and going to Rockingham, because if you're going to Rockingham, I don't think there needs to be 2 races at Charlotte, 1 race at North Wilkesboro, 1 race at Rockingham, 2 at Darlington, 2 at Martinsville. I mean, they're all super close, but that's very saturated. I would like to see, if we do go to Rockingham, I'd like to see Charlotte, one of Charlotte's dates or one of Darlington's dates or something, go to, a track that maybe we haven't ran at in a while or something. But
I think we could lose a Darlington date just for the sole fact, like keep the Southern 500 as the Southern 500. Like even if you move it to earlier in the schedule, it doesn't matter. But keep one of the Darlington dates. And then the only reason I say that is just because with Charlotte, you run 2 completely different configurations of the
yeah,
track. On, the 600 is the oval, and then the Roval is the road course and the oval together. It's like, so you run 2 different like styles of track, so it's kind of not really like you're having 2 races it's not 2 races of the same thing, I should say.
I think that's fine. If you want to have 2 dates, like Charlotte, for example, and you run one as a 600, a crown jewel, and you run the other as a Roval, I'm fine with that. But like, I don't think Kansas should have 2 dates.
Absolutely not.
I don't think Phoenix should have 2 dates.
Nope.
And people might hate me for this because I know they love going out there, but I don't think Vegas should have 2 races. 2
I don't
dates.
think so either.
So I don't know, either hit it on the West Coast swing on the way out there or towards the end of the year. But the way that the schedule is now, it's like so random. It's like Homestead, then Vegas, then back again to Martinsville, I think. And it's just like, and then back up to Phoenix.
Yeah. You make 2 trips to the West Coast in 4 weeks. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having having those 5 tracks keep their 2 dates, having Kansas lose a date, Phoenix lose a date, Las Vegas lose a date. That's 3 open races. You can add Kentucky, you can add Rockingham, you can add another road course if you want. I'm just spitballing there. Like, I think that would be, you could add Portland if you wanted, you could add Canada if you wanted, you could, like I said, you could do you could play around with those 3 dates, and I think that would bring a lot of excitement to some fans for sure. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's trending to the point of every every track is only going to have 1 date.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think you could keep pick 5 tracks and have those be your crown jewels or whatever, and those races deserve 2 days, which I think is fine, fair enough to say. I think you probably should race at Daytona and Talladega twice a year because of the factor of it. I think Bristol and Martinsville are 2 of the most exciting races, so going there twice is fine, especially since they're local. But like,
I don't think Atlanta needs 2 dates.
No, I don't either. But it's like if you can't fully fill one track, like 1 date, you don't need a second date. Like Richmond is like okay attended, but it's like, yeah, you have 50% capacity over 2 races. Well, maybe you could just have 1 race where it's sold out. Same thing at Kansas, same thing at Vegas, same thing at Phoenix. So
yeah, no, I agree.
That's my 2 cents. I think there's a lot of room to add 3 tracks. Like, if you take those 3 races away, you get 3 options to put stuff. And I think putting like a Rockingham would be awesome for the Cup Series. I think putting, Kentucky. I keep saying going back to that, but I think that's a track, Kentucky or Chicagoland.
I would love to go back to Chicagoland, but I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Or if you even add like, a rate, if you want to expand your market and get to somewhere you're not, you could go to Portland and race Cup, or you could go to Canada and race Cup. Not saying it's what maybe the best option, but there are like, is a Cup race at Portland or Canada going to be a better race than a second Las Vegas race? I don't know. Some people are going to say yes, some people are going to say no, but I at least think having that diversity on the schedule is something that is overall good for the sport. And
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, I think it makes a more complete champion,
Yes.
because if you're racing 10 tracks twice, which is about what we do now,
Mhm.
uh, probably. I mean, there's probably 16 races that you're going to go, like, 8 tracks that you're going to twice. That's 16 races there. So,
Yeah.
if you go to 30 unique tracks instead of 25 unique tracks, I think that just adds to saying, okay, this person, the champion at the end of the year was the most complete driver from A to Z on short tracks, on intermediates, on oval, on super speedways, on road courses.
Yeah, but I mean, like, even with your example, if you have those 8 tracks that we go to twice and that's 16 races, that's almost half your schedule
Right.
tied up in 8 racetracks.
Yep. And
Like, that's a little too much.
it's the same way too. Like, you look at the back half of the schedule, Darlington, or it's Richmond, Darlington, Atlanta, Daytona, Talladega, Martinsville, Phoenix, Las Vegas. We only have 10 weeks left
Bristol.
in the season. Bristol. I think the only two tracks that are new from the break on are Watkins Glen and Homestead. Everything
Yeah,
else is a
we've
repeat.
raced that earlier this year.
Yeah. So I would like to see, even so, I would like to see NASCAR diversify that a little bit more. I would like to see maybe, uh, I guess they have to do that because if you have 2 races at one track 3 months apart or whatever, so I don't know. I think the solution, like we both agree, is to have more tracks and less tracks have 2 dates.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, NASCAR. It seems like NASCAR is trending in that direction for sure. So
Yeah, we'll see what happens, and, I'm excited for 2025. I hope we get a lot of great racing. I know the truck series is gonna be even more up in the air because Christian Eckes is going to, he's going to Xfinity, and Corey Haim, I think, is going to Xfinity as well, so
yeah,
you you really don't have a flagship driver there anymore.
yeah. I'm sure somebody will. I mean, Xfinity Series is going to be really, really competitive next year. You're going to have. Well, I guess you're losing Shane Van Gisbergen,
Yes,
and you're losing AJ Allmendinger, but you're
yes.
adding Eckes, Heim, and Zilich, which I think are 3 of the best prospects in NASCAR. So
I also think, Carson Kvapil is gonna go to,
yeah,
Xfinity as well.
yeah, he's been running really well. Even I'm sure Shane Van Gisbergen and Allmendinger and guys are going to come down and run races too, and that's even just going to make it more competitive. So I think it's really, really going to be an awesome field next year in the Xfinity Series. So
Yeah, and with the guys that are in there now, like your Parker Retzlavs, your Ryan Siegs, your Sam Mayers, your Sheldon Creeds, like those guys, and Jesse Love and stuff like that. Like those guys still put on a fantastic show. Best race of the weekend every weekend. Like just
yeah,
because of how on edge they drive those cars.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Austin Hill's still going to be there. He's going to be really, really competitive on super speedways and really any track. And Jesse Love has been good this year. Has won already. So it's gonna be really good. It's gonna be really good. So yeah, I don't know. I know we've gone long. We've almost ran an hour and 15 minutes, but uh, we've had a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like I said, I'm excited for 2025. I hope we can finish off 2024 real strong. And I'm excited to see who's going to win these championships. I know the Truck Series. Oh my gosh, man! Between Christian Eckes, Ty Majeski, and Corey Heim, it's going to be a bloodbath to see who's going to win that one.
yeah. It's gonna be amazing. Like, I feel like honestly, the Truck Series championship every year has been like the best championship at Phoenix. It's been close every single time. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
yeah.
So
So we'll move on to Atlanta this weekend, and you're going to be pitting. Who you pitting for this weekend?
This week I'm going to be pitting the 35 Xfinity car, who is Mason Maggio is in it this week. And then going to be the 44 Cup car, JJ Yaley's driving it for us. So.
Oh, JJ Yaley.
Yep.
Wheelman.
Yes, and veteran, big time Cup Series veteran, been doing it for a long time. So
yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah, knows how to keep the car clean, and like Joey, I think we'll have a good shot at a top 25 finish at the end of the race. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, good luck to you, man. I will. I'll be watching.
Yep.
And yeah, we'll catch back up next weekend or next week.
Yep.
And
where we'll preview Watkins Glen road course.
Yep, talk about Watkins Glen and see what happened at Atlanta and catch up on all that.
That's right.
So you be safe, Johnny. Don't get hit out there. And like I said, I'll be watching it at the house. Hopefully everybody enjoys it. And yeah, so we will catch you guys in the next podcast. Till then, you guys be good.